Good afternoon. It is 2:30 on a Friday. We are in the month of April. This is All Things Advocacy with AARP North Dakota. I'm Josh Askvig, State Director for AARP. Janelle, good to see you again. Janelle, I'm seeing signs that the legislature might be slowly grinding its way toward a eventual conclusion.
Yeah, it's a slow grind, but it's getting there. We're day 61 today, but yeah, all signs are pointing towards nearing the end, including, scheduling 2 floor sessions a day, both in the House and the Senate. We've got conference committees that have already met. Some have already agreed on some solutions. So yeah, everything is pointing in the direction that they should finish in the next couple of weeks or so.
So I thought what was telling yesterday is that the House concurred in at least two, I think it was maybe three appropriations bills. And just for those of you watching, if you're not familiar, if the House passes a bill, if the Senate goes and makes changes, then it comes back to the House, and the House can either concur with the changes, i.e., we agree with all of these changes, or they can make changes of their own as part of it. And granted, these were not major appropriations bills, but they were appropriations bills, which tells me clearly we're starting to see some of the tumblers fall into place, as you mentioned already, conference committees and some of those things. So day 61, 19 total days potentially left as part of it. So let's talk maybe about this week and what happened this week. I would say it was kind of a bumpy week for us. Probably the first real bumpy week we've had this session as part of it. But let's talk first about the bad news, which is House Bill 1040.
Yeah, we've been fighting all session with several of our partners really to maintain that retirement security. And we felt good, I think, going into the floor vote, but unfortunately things sometimes don't go your way. Even when you feel good about something,
Right.
you might miss, small signs. But 1040 did pass on the Senate side by quite a wide margin. And I think what we know is now that the Senate Appropriations Committee now will take a second look at it. So they'll really dig into the details about how much this is going to cost North Dakota to move away from that defined benefit plan. So this is where, they've agreed on the policy. They say, yeah, we really want to move away from this defined benefit to a defined contribution. But now they're going to figure out how much is it going to cost the state, realistically to move away from this. So that's going to happen next week.
Yeah, so just a couple of semantics that I want to make sure we explain to folks in case they're familiar, because if the Senate voted on it, why does it go back to the Appropriations Committee? And so I'm just going to back up a little bit. If you remember a couple weeks ago, we were excited because the State and Local Government Committee had originally given it do not pass. Last week, we reported out they had changed that recommendation to no committee recommendation. And so if it has a do not pass recommendation or a no committee recommendation, even if there's money involved, those bills go straight to the floor. They don't re-refer them to appropriations. And so in this instance, no committee recommendation, the bill ends up getting approved on the floor. They then essentially undo that, although it's not a good sign. I mean, the fact that the vote happened the way it is from our perspective is not a good sign. It's legislators are on record now in support of it, but they then send it to appropriations so they can make sure, as you mentioned, those costs can get calculated into the overall budget. So the bad news is they've already got a record of at least, looked like, I think it was 29 to 18 was the final vote. 29 senators voted in favor of it. The good news is there is a potential that amendments happen in appropriations and maybe something changes and people change their mind when they do see the actual cost implications of it. But not a good move, not a good step.
No, but that has happened before. And I think more time that you have to really dig in and to consider it and to really weigh the pros and cons of it, especially in the context of the larger budget, knowing that there are still what they call orphan bills, that have appropriations or fiscal notes tied to them, but they also have several large budgets that they haven't even started to really work through some of the details, including the Department of Human Services budget. They'll start to go through those amendments. So I think once you start to sift through some of those things, they get the larger financial picture and to figure out, are we going to be able to balance the budget before we leave? And then what does that look like for future, legislatures to know what we've spent and what we have remaining? So
yeah, absolutely. So 1040, more to come, but I would say we're not in a great position, at least from our perspective, about where that's going. there still is, I just want to reference this, 2239 is still alive in the House. That's the pension bill that we actually supported that would shore up the existing pension fund and do some good things for the pension fund. But realistically, I think the House is just waiting to see what happens with 1040, because if 1040 gets voted down for some reason, I think 2239 is likely a vehicle to resurrect that.
Yep. So that's just sitting in committee right now with no action at this point.
Awesome. Well, then let's pivot to some I would call this the roller coaster of the week. When I said this is a bumpy week, it was really a bumpy week.
And it wasn't just because of the weather.
Yeah,
we didn't have a snowstorm in the middle of it all.
So we had great news on Monday morning on Senate Bill 2140. Last week we reported out that bill was in the House Appropriations Committee, or was that voted out of House Appropriations? It's all kind of blurring together.
Yeah, that happened on Monday.
Okay, so talk about what happened with 2140 on Monday with Senate Bill 2140, which is the insulin cap.
So again, as you mentioned, when committees vote on bills that have fiscal notes, the House Human Services Committee approved it, so it got re-referred down to House Appropriations. They had a really good discussion about the cost of insulin, whether or not, this is a federal issue or if this is something states can really weigh into, how many people is this going to impact. So this is where they dig into the details about the money. But the great news was they voted 14-8, so 14 in favor of moving that bill forward. So now, because it got a favorable recommendation, it goes back up to the House floor. And this is where we had those starts and stops. So it was originally on the calendar,
Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
We thought it was going to get voted on Tuesday.
We did, but now it's been delayed by 4 legislative days. And there are just things that are outside of our control that it's been delayed by those few days. But what we've heard is there's a pretty strong will to pass this bill. There's a lot of legislators that are very interested in this bill. They think it's a positive step forward. They know it's not going to cost the state a tremendous amount of money. We know so many people rely on insulin. Really, it's a life or death situation for some folks. And so we're seeing a trending in the positive direction that this bill could pass on Monday morning. So.
Yeah, I want to just emphasize, I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that doesn't mean you should rest on your laurels. Make sure you're talking to every your representatives for sure, other representatives, if you can. It's really important. As Janelle just mentioned on another bill, on the pension bill, we felt decent going into that too, and it turned out to not be so great. And things can change, especially this time of the session. They're getting a little cranky. They've been up there for a while. They're having really long days, especially appropriators right now. Those who sit on the Appropriations Committee as part of it. So I'm just going to give a pitch now. Ask your representatives to vote yes on Senate Bill 2140. I do want to note, because we've received a couple of emails about it, 2140 does only start with PERS, but it does then require PERS to come back next legislative session to expand it statewide for anybody that has insurance coverage in the state of North Dakota. So yes, it's a small step, certainly not the larger prescription drug price reform that we were working on earlier this session. But this is, as we have told legislators, I know you have, talking to House members on the floor, this is really the last real piece of legislation that gets at consumer costs that's left in the North Dakota legislature. So anything else this week that you want to talk about? I mean, it was kind of a weird week with the snowstorm and
No, there's a lot of sitting around and waiting right now, just as they consider to work out details. But I think that gives you and I a lot of time to continue to have conversations with legislators, catch them when they're sitting at their desk, or as they're walking down the hallways. You get some really good conversation starters about insulin, and you can, I don't think we'll ever stop until we get that last vote. I think we're always continually, making sure that we can get 1 or 2 votes more in our favor, and it's never over until that final vote. So that's what we've been doing in between waiting for committee votes. We've been talking to legislators. So.
Absolutely. So, well, let's pivot to next week then. Again, it's that time of the session where we think we know where things are going to happen and what happened. One thing we're 99% sure of is the House of Representatives on Monday morning, and it's likely going to be right at 8 a.m. I mean, we're getting every indication it's going to probably be the first thing they tackle, in part because I think they're tired of hearing from you all and us about the importance of the insulin cap. But 2140 kind of kicks off the week next week.
Yeah, it'll be voted on by the House. It should be that morning, otherwise if something else comes up over the weekends, but it should be voted on. And so there's still plenty of time to send a quick note to your legislator if they're doing forums in communities this weekend. Stop by, say hi, say this is really a good bill to vote for. And I think by and large, you'll get some positive responses or some good questions. And so keep that conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the bill, just as a quick refresher for you, especially if you get a chance over Easter services this weekend or somewhere else, get a chance to talk to your representative, would put a $25 cap on insulin and insulin products for individuals in the North Dakota Public Employees Retirement System. It would also then require PERS to bring a bill back next session to expand it statewide as part of it. So great, I won't say great, a good step forward and something that should be done this session to continue to move things forward. In addition, we already talked a little bit about this, but House Bill 1040 is going to Senate Appropriations.
Yep.
What more do you want to say about that?
That'll be Tuesday afternoon, and we anticipate there'll be several amendments to that bill from lots of different people. We're not really sure what they look like yet. We won't know until Tuesday afternoon, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And then conference committees are starting up. I know you talked a little bit about this in this week. Any in particular that we have our eye on so far?
Not right now. No, everything that we've really been focusing our efforts on have either passed both chambers and have been signed, or else, are well on their way. So
yeah. So let's just cover briefly. I'm going to pivot just for a second and put Marnie on her toes, which she's already been on her toes once. It's part of it. But let's just talk about, other than the things we've talked about today, 2140, the pension bills, kind of what else do we have kind of still hanging out there that we're keeping an eye on? Obviously, the Department of Human Services budget, which has got a number of things to improve home and community-based care for folks needing long-term care needs. The homestead property tax credit expansion is still tied up as part of the larger tax negotiation package, although we feel decent with where that's at right now.
There's a tremendous amount of support for that.
Part of that part. It sounds like some of the expansion of the Medicaid fraud unit in the Attorney General's budget looks like it's in decent shape.
Yeah, that came out of House Appropriations actually that was yesterday afternoon, but they've supported the enhancements. So 4 new FTEs, that'll really bolster the ability of that investigation unit to look at more. Their cases have just skyrocketed, and you've got a director that also serves as the attorney, so there tends to be a little bit of a bottleneck in terms of the cases, but they've gotten a lot of support both in the House and in the Senate to really give them more staff that they need,
which we have strongly supported, helping enhance Medicaid fraud investigations in the state of North Dakota. And then I think the last one, at least that I know of off the top of my head, and then you can add anything else. I'm just trying to give you all a picture of where this is headed and what we still have out there. So if you think we've been super focused on a couple of things, there's a lot of other things left here. As part of it is the Housing Incentive Fund funding, still to be determined.
That'll be Tuesday morning as well.
Okay.
They're finalizing some details on the Industrial Commission budget, which is where the Housing Finance Agency sits in, but they're starting to put all those pieces together. So that's Tuesday morning that they'll discuss that budget as well.
Awesome. So, okay, let's talk about what do we want folks to do, other than, first of all, enjoy your Easter weekend, Passover for those of you who celebrate that. I think Ramadan's probably coming to an end here too. Part of it, but if we want folks to take action this weekend, what do we need them to do?
Again, just encourage your legislator to support Senate Bill 2140. The thing I think most folks want to, if they get questions, what I've gotten a lot of questions about is, well, isn't this a federal issue? Didn't this just get fixed? And you can say yes for Medicare, but not for for broader reform. So I think this is really complementary to what we've seen at the federal level, and I think it's a step in the direction for PERS, and then hopefully moving it into the future. So it's a dual focus solution, but again, this is a great thing for legislators to support, to really help push down the price of medicine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Just for illustrative purposes, ARP fought hard to get the Medicare out-of-pocket cap for insulin. There's approximately, and I'm rounding, but approximately 60,000 North Dakotans that are diabetics today. Of those, about 2,500 are Medicare beneficiaries. So there's still this large swath of people who aren't Medicare beneficiaries, who aren't covered by the federal $35 insulin cap that we fought for. That's why we're continuing to fight for this here at the state level. And again, the PERS cap won't fill that entire gap, but it'll take another chunk out of the bucket and then look to expand it to everybody next legislative session on that. So, okay, the last thing I just want to quickly cover is, before we get out of here, for for the weekend in the day is some of you have asked, many of you attended our legislative lowdowns where we talked about where things were at the halftime. We have decided that we are going to do our legislative wrap. We feel, I'm not going to say confident, say we feel comfortable scheduling the legislative recap is going to be May 8th. It's going to be a virtual legislative recap event online, and we'll be posting more information very soon on aarp.org/nd events or aarp.org/nd advocacy, but it will be May 8th. You can mark your calendars. I think we scheduled it for 11 a.m., but again, watch those two sites, either aarp.org/nd events or aarp.org/nd advocacy for more information. I know many of you are very interested. We do want to do a full coverage of everything that has happened this session. So, Janelle, headed into Easter weekend, favorite Easter tradition in your family?
Oh gosh, I would say dyeing eggs. My kids always love dyeing eggs, and I think they continue to like doing that. I don't even think we'll do it this year, but that's always been their favorite thing to do. So
it's fun. Ours is the egg hunt in the morning. So the kids, we also dye eggs, and I thought we were going to get out of it this year. And then my 9-year-old promptly reminded me this morning when she was home from school and I was working from home, brought the egg dye pack down and set it on my desk and politely asked, Dad, are we going to dye eggs this year? So I think we're going to be doing that tonight. And then the Easter bunny, she always hides them around, usually in the yard. I don't think we're going to get them in the yard this year, or we're just not going to dye them and hide them in the yard as part of it. So with that, anything else you want to cover?
No, we look forward to seeing you next week. So
happy Easter. Have a great rest of your weekend. And this has been another All Things Advocacy with AARP.